Good morning and welcome. My name is James Hacon. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at MAPAL Group, and we're delighted to welcome David Singleton, who's joining us from Dubai. I'm currently based in Scotland, where it's, I'm sure, much worse weather, slightly raining, although fingers crossed for snow later in the week. It would be great to have a white Christmas. My absolute privilege to welcome David. David is an advisor, a coach, and a non-exec director. Very experienced in the hospitality industry. And here at MAPAL Group, we're a hospitality software business, and we offer around 9 different solutions to 54 different countries around the world, being able to support around 50,000 restaurant and hospitality sites. And it's a really fantastic conjunction and relationship we've got with David, who helps to represent us in the Middle East. And today we're really going to look a little bit about what this year has held, what the year ahead has held. And also I was going to tap into David's knowledge and experience as a coach to be able to help us think about the next couple of weeks where a number of you will have time off, and to be able to think about what you might want to percolate or some of your own objectives for next year and so on. But to begin with, David, welcome.
Thank you. It's very good to see you, James. Nice to see you, and nice to see everybody wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, I think we've got over 200 people tuning in. I think that we have got a pretty Middle East focus here, because I know that that's become your speciality in recent years, yes, David, but people from other places too. So let's just dive straight in by getting you to very quickly introduce yourself a bit better than what I just did, and talk a little bit about what it is you do.
Yeah, well, I'm now into my 11th year working internationally. When I left Mitchells and Butlers in England and headed to Moscow, where I worked in Russia and the CIS for 3 years. But for the last 7.5 years, I've been based here in Dubai, where I worked with the Altai family, running their hospitality business. I then ran the Hard Rock business across EMEA and South Asia. And for the last 2.5 years, I've worked now as an independent advisor, consultant, and a leadership coach to leaders here and teams and brands. So all my work now really does overlap using my experience. I did a country count, James. Yeah, I've worked 40 countries, and believe it or not, in my 40th year now. So it's a privilege to still be around, but also a privilege to be here in Dubai, where the dynamics of the industry and industry as a whole is very, very exciting for us here.
No, that's great. I think I've had the great privilege of connecting with you in a number of places. I think the ones that come to mind are Gdansk for breakfast once, I think, yes, sometimes in Saudi Arabia and a few other places. So I can definitely endorse David's very international experience. But if we think about, I mean, you're talking about Dubai, obviously we're talking more generally about the Middle East, but it has been a big year for the UAE, right? I think that had a big anniversary. I think there's been the Expo. Are you able to talk a little bit about what's been happening this year generally? I mean, obviously we started off the beginning of the year with the midst of still being in the pandemic, and we are now seeming to be heading back into some difficult times in parts of Europe, but just talk about that process.
Yeah, yes, it's interesting, James. The beginning of the year was very, very challenging. That we were right in the middle of the pandemic. Infections were still quite high, but the rulers and the government here were intent that Dubai and the UAE would come out fastest and strongest by any country in the world. And that's exactly what they've done. When we were locked down, we really were locked down. Abu Dhabi was kind of cordoned off for a very long period of time. So for comparison, for those who don't know this region, so imagine I'm going to say Coventry and London in terms of distance. In order to get to Abu Dhabi, which is the capital of the UAE, you had to be proven either to be vaccinated or have a clean PCR test. So they literally put the border up to drive in. And the Expo 2020 was postponed for 1 year, so we're now full headlong into Expo here, which is just up the road here, which is the size of Monaco. And if you imagine 5 years ago, that part of the desert was literally desert. Now, every single country has a pavilion at Expo. So tourism, so for us right now, tourism is high. We're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the United Arab Emirates coming together. And there is so much happening here. And if we look for, Dubai and the UAE we're driven by tourism. And so tourism is something that we've been very keen to protect, and tourism levels are very high, occupancies in the hotels, very high. Exhibitions, conference seasons are back on again. And but we're also very, very mindful of the pandemic around the world, which has affected us. We've got maybe a couple of hundred infections a day out of 300,000 tests. So it's still quite low, but we're very, very mindful, because any outbreak, particularly the latest outbreak, could really, really harm what is happening here. So we've come out, and I often refer, James, to this post-COVID economy, which is where we are now. And the hospitality industry, as we know, the hotel industry, as we know, has changed quite significantly. The style of leadership here has changed quite significantly. Empathetic leadership, etc. Things like that are becoming more and more important in the world of doing business here. And as we look into next year, 2022, we are extremely optimistic about the growth of the region here, but also the wider growth of the GCC. When we look, we're having an awful lot of government trade missions here at the moment, which I get involved with my relationship with the British Business Group. Something that isn't reported on back home in the UK is that what Boris has done, which seems to be a good thing, but perhaps he should talk about it a bit more, is how he's strengthened every single government department for UK to do business overseas. And there's mission after mission coming to the Middle East to create the GCC free trade deal, which I get involved with, to one side, where we're introduced to the missions to actually explain what is going on the ground here and how to do business here in the Middle East. So there's a lot going on.
That's really interesting. And when we get into the kind of the grassroots of hospitality, I know that in various parts of the world, everyone seems to be talking about the challenge of people and recruiting people. And I think if we rewind to a previous webinar that we did together, I'm sure that you said that the big challenge was that lots of people were let go. A lot of the people returned to Southeast Asia and India and all of these places where a lot of the workforce traditionally come from in the Middle East, particularly around the UAE. What's the situation there now? Is that bouncing back? Are people returning?
Yeah, it's this perfect storm that we're experiencing at the moment. That's having different kind of effects around the world. Back in Europe, people are demanding greater salaries. They've moved into different parts of. They've taken different jobs. Here, you're right. Workforces were literally disbanded and they went back to their home countries, invariably, typically in South Asia. Many of them are coming back, but because of the rapid speed of the hospitality industry coming back, it's been challenging. To some operators, they may see that as a good thing. It always blew my mind when I came here that I've been used to running restaurant floors with 5, 6, 7 people on the floor, obviously depending on the size. But here, there'll be 20 people on the floor, and it's staffing by numbers and not necessarily staffing by expertise and talent, which is where we're having to really, really lean towards now. Businesses have to work differently, and learning how to evolve their way is becoming a real art for them now. So it's improving, but it's by no means out of it at the moment. Many restaurants opening over here. Solutions Leisure, which is a MAPAL client, have just opened 3 restaurants in Abu Dhabi. There's another client of yours at the moment here, which is about to open 7 restaurants. They're just waiting to ink that deal. But imagine trying in this perfect storm, where it is still quite uncertain, where to get staff is very, very challenging. To not staff 1 but 7, And again, it is different. So to hire one employee, to onboard them with visa costs and flights in, and insurance, and everything like that, can cost about £2,000. So imagine hiring 100 staff for one restaurant and multiplying that. It's not easy by any stretch, and which is where I do a lot of my work in advising these companies on the how-to.
That's really interesting. And if we think about other parts of the Middle East, I know that at the moment you're doing a lot of work in Saudi Arabia, and I mean, what's the situation in those countries in terms of employment, and what's the opportunity that you're seeing there? Because I think it's somewhat different from the UAE, right?
Yes, it is. Saudi Arabia. Imagine perception of Saudi Arabia on the outside world. It goes from golly, we can't go there and do business to let's get on this train right now. And I'm on the latter train. It's what I call this human revolution that's gone on there. Where they are gravitating fast from to enter their post-oil economy. They don't want another Dubai, they don't want another Abu Dhabi, they don't want another New York, they want another Saudi Arabia. And the transformation that is happening there is quite extraordinary. And where there were quite strict rules and laws on how I could walk through a mall with somebody else, a female, or how females could work or females could do business. We read about all the human rights issues that Saudi Arabia have been a part of. But they are working so hard, like you wouldn't believe, to transform the image of Saudi Arabia and transform ways of working. If I take the last 2 weekends where I've had visitors from Saudi Arabia to do business, one company looking to onboard 40 restaurant brands for themselves. Had a meeting this morning. It's bring me brands. I need 20 restaurant brands and I need them right now. But also out of that, you have a magnificent generation of entrepreneurs. And I see that happening here. I do see this age of entrepreneurship coming through, where young Saudis, young Emiratis, young Arabs have been educated in Boston, in Cambridge, in Oxford, around the world, and then come back to their home country with this wealth of knowledge from around the world. And they want to do it for themselves in their own country. So what we will see is these, against where when Dubai was born 25 years ago, there was this wave of international brands coming in because they craved international brands, but didn't have them. Now what we're seeing is local entrepreneurs creating their own brands with their own knowledge, with the help of people like me, to evolve their own brands, to then go the other way and globalize. And in Saudi Arabia, there's a big effort and a big focus to do that, to really build local entrepreneurship. And for those brands, I say this to everybody, those brands that are here now, or on board, on the ground now, particularly in Saudi Arabia, as the country emerges, will be part of the new Saudi Arabia. And local, young Saudis and Saudis will be extremely loyal to those brands. But you just have to pick your partner, have the right advisor on board, and make sure you count and you double count, you triple count, and you work with the right people.
That's really interesting, and I think that opening up of Saudi Arabia and the time that I've been there, and we're going again next year for sure. I think it's a really interesting opportunity for many. Given that many people who are on the call are from the region, I mean, let's talk more generally about trends. So,
yes.
what you see for next year. So we're going to pick up that crystal ball that I know that you carry around with you all the time, and. I mean, in all seriousness, what do you think will transpire in next year, and how do you see it unfolding?
Well, for us here, I see innovation, I see consolidation, and I see more new brands, but smaller brands coming from outside the region into the region to work alongside those that are emerging within the region. I see the virtual world just growing exponentially still, James. we're seeing some enormous, hundreds of millions of dollars going into cloud world here now, and brands like Icon, Kitobi, just take those two. In the region in the last quarter, $600-700 million going into just those two companies, and also you've got Reef, you've got C3 coming in out of the America into with big deep pockets of cash. Now, what's going to happen there is it's going to drive quality, it's going to drive standards, and it's going to drive efficiency, innovation. Food tech is going to continue to evolve there, and then how does that impact brick and mortar? Brick and mortar has simply got to be better at what they do, and we simply can't open a restaurant just as a brick and mortar business anymore, I don't think, unless you really are at the high end. But I think generally you've got to have this light and dark operation now. I see investment in people becoming even stronger. We don't have swathes of workforce here like we used to, so I think we have to look after our leadership first, to train them, the front line. We've got to be much better at that. And then we've still got these malls opening, James. The malls, when you were last year, they were coming out of the ground. Sure, they slowed up, but on February 17th next year, we've got another new mega mall, 10 minutes away from Mall of the Emirates, the second biggest mall in the world. And that has got to be filled with F&B brands and retail. How is that going to evolve? That's going to be fascinating.
So if you were sitting in the shoes of an operator, and I know that you coach a number of people and on a number of boards, what would you be thinking most about for 2022? As in, what are the things that you'd be most concerned about, and what would you see the biggest opportunities were? I mean, you talk about dark kitchens. I get the people piece, but is there anything particular that you think that people might need to think about, and which maybe comes as a surprise, maybe?
Well, I don't think there's any surprise, James, but I think we're still not out of this pandemic by any stretch of the imagination. Look how fast this Omicron, or whatever it's called, is just going around the world now. And who knows what's going to happen in our hospitality industry or in our industry next March, next July. So I've just come from a team session with a hotel this morning where I'm working with the entire leadership team. And I'm talking to them about, Q1, get busy. And if you haven't planned it right now, you're almost in trouble because it starts in less than 2 weeks. So Q1 is going to be your golden quarter to bank results and be ready and get yourself into a position that if we end up into another lockdown, you're ready and you're prepared. And not only fiscally, organizationally, and from the team as well. So I don't care what anybody says. All of us in the last 2 years have been affected by this pandemic. And it hasn't been pleasant, I don't think, for anybody. And families have been affected, our employees, our bosses, our companies, our brands, everyone's been affected. Let's not go there again. And that's what I focus on a lot now, James. With some people, kind of fixing people up and helping them believe in themselves again, to actually really planning and building in, working a lot really on what I call stretch leadership. How can we really stretch ourselves? And if money were no object, what could we really do in our workplace? Really doing what I always used to do when I was running restaurants.
Thank you, David. And obviously, as you said, though, like Q1 starting in 2 weeks, it's not long left. Let's hope that most people have already got some degree of plans in place. But let's face it, all the business planning in the world doesn't overcome the fact that when you get downtime and some time off, things percolate, right? They percolate, gives you an opportunity to think. And I think as a coach, rather than necessarily a kind of advisor, what advice do you give for people in terms of when they're taking time off, around objective setting, about thinking about next year? Obviously, we always talk about New Year's resolutions, but I think there's a much more formal ability to be able to set some of your own targets. What would your advice be on an individual basis to people?
Yeah, I talk a lot, James, about having a life balance. I remember when I worked back in the UK, whether we like it or not, we worked in this command and control environment. albeit I work with wonderful people in a wonderful brand. And by that, I mean, we were always on call. If an email came in, we responded to it. If a phone call arrived in our downtime at the weekend, we took it and we actioned it, to the detriment of our family, to the detriment of our friends. And it wasn't till I'd left and I wasn't in that environment anymore that I realized I had time to myself. I never looked after myself. I was unfit. I was unhealthy, and I didn't have any hobbies. And I always talk about, we talk about people first, and we talk about leadership first, and then our teams, and then our guests. That is really, really important. Think about how you are looking after yourself when you do have some downtime. Where you are out in the countryside, I can see where you're walking out in the beautiful countryside, and you value that and you enjoy it. And then I've made a real conscious effort to meet more people this year than ever before. And I've met some amazing, incredible people where several times a week I'll tools down and I'll go and meet somebody that I've never met before. And the things I learn and the people I meet are quite extraordinary. But in the workplace, where a lot of people perhaps don't want to talk about how they might be struggling, perhaps, after this last 2 years, there might be financial, it might be health, it might be mental health, it might be all of these things. As leaders and as employees and as just lovely people, look out for your colleagues and just take time out and have a cup of coffee with somebody and look after each other.
That's really pertinent advice. And I think a lot of people have definitely spent the last couple of years learning that their behaviors and their lives of before are definitely things that they want to change. And I think that it's one of the big things that's impacting the broader sector in terms of working hours. And there's a perception from many that everyone's just gone off and working in other industries, and that's definitely part of it. But I think actually what some of the analysis we've done here at MAPAL Group, looking at the tens of thousands of operators that we've got access to some of their employee data, and looking at the average hours worked, is that actually a big part of that is people choosing to work fewer hours rather than, whereas before people may have been working nearer 50 hours in the UK, for instance, we find that people are working late 30s, early 40s, and that we've seen that change in average, which means that, of course, that for the same job to be delivered, you potentially need a fifth more team than you needed before.
Yeah. But also, James, we've over the last couple of years, we've become, reliant on our laptops and our tablets, haven't we? Because we've been in a virtual world. It's how do we decouple ourselves from our laptops and from Zoom and from Teams and get out meeting people again? I know it's not easy at the moment, and this time will pass and we'll come through it again. But make a conscious effort to get out of our home offices, be safe, and go and meet people again. And remember to be a colleague, a friend, a human, a family member. And that is really, really important. I did a session to a team a few weeks ago of a team of people who had not been together for 2 years. And we were talking about how do we bring this team back together again and learn, you just kind of reinstill those rituals and routines back into our daily work again. And there was one stat put up on a screen that the average American is spending 14 and a half hours on a screen of some sort a day. 5.5 of those are on email. And this guy in the front put his hand up and said, well, actually, I think I probably do 8 hours a day on my email, which really, really shocked me. And we then had a conversation about, well, if we know this, and sometimes it's this cattle prod, that I'm using on people to actually say, well, if it's 8 hours now, what if you kind of stopped and made that 5 hours? And if you're going to have a Zoom call, put it on your phone and go for a walk. Have a walking Zoom call. Get yourself healthy again. Or look through your diary, see how many of those meetings you can cancel because they're not necessary. And there's one guy who I challenged because I phoned him at 7 o'clock in the morning because he said to me, I haven't got any time to talk to you tomorrow. And I said to him, talk to me while you walk into the office. And then when you get to the office, we'll carry on. And we opened up his laptop and I said, show me your calendar today. And I said, when can you talk to him? He said, no time. He's blocked out, wall to wall. I said, cancel 3 of those meetings right now. Let's find yourself some time. Cancel 3 meetings that he was not in control of. And when I called him, we had a long conversation after that. The following week, and I said, right, what did you do differently? And in that week, he took half the amount of meetings. He reinstated the rituals and behaviors he had before. And he said, I feel so much better. I'm going into the gym in the morning. I'm not grumpy anymore. I'm not miserable. I feel so much better. I'm in control. I've taken back control. And that's something that I would really love people, if they were going to take anything from this, to kind of take back control, away from these laptops, away from email. Of course, they're necessary, but just reschedule and restart yourselves, and go and get some FaceTime with people again and be meaningful.
That's fantastic. Thank you, David. Well, we've got quite a few people joining. If anybody wants to leave a comment, maybe just tell us who you are, where you're from. If you've got a specific question, what are your objectives for next year going to be? We'd love to hear from you. Feel free to start popping those in the comments. If you're on YouTube, that means within the YouTube chat, so you'll need to log into your Google or YouTube account. If you're on LinkedIn, the same goes. You should probably be logged in by now, but do feel free to pop a comment in there just to let us know that you're watching, who you are, where you're from, and any questions. So the question for you then, David, is that you've talked more broadly about what people should be doing. So what are you going to do differently next year?
I've got, I had my own internal restructure, James, over the last month. And I got some really exciting stuff happening next year, which we'll be able to talk more about. But one thing that I did over the last couple of years was to really embed myself into my coaching world. And that's one of my mentors encouraged me to do that. He said to me, David, he said, you've always been a coach leader. Just get out and coach and do what you're doing now. And that's one of my other coaches. He said to me, never forget your rookie skills. Never forget what got you to where you are now. And I'm pretty sure that everybody is watching this is a leader of sorts, and they're a leader because they're good at what they do. But get back to the floor and go and talk to the service, talk to the busboys, talk to the chefs. Take time out and mean it. Be an active listener when you are talking with them and listening with them. And one of those exciting things, I'm going to be capturing or starting my big project. Every year, I have a ritual that I do something that I thought I could never do or would never do. And that was born out of the time when I actually ended up in Moscow. I thought, blimey, O'Reilly, I never thought I'd end up going to Moscow on holiday, let alone living and working in the whole of Russia. It was fascinating. It taught me so much. And also, as on the gentle side, if anybody has the opportunity to work internationally, they should. I mean, as we've been in conferences around the world, James, we can see how enriching it is and how much you can learn. So my one thing is to write my book next year, and I'm excited about that. I've got an amazing publisher in the US who I'm talking to at the moment, and it's not going to be some boring leadership book. It's not about telling anything, and as leaders, we should never be telling. It's about sharing and showing, and my perspectives on leadership and how I've lived that in my life, be that wherever it is, in Africa or India or Sri Lanka or America or England, wherever it is, because the power of diversity as a leader and working in a diverse workforce is extremely enriching, and I use a lot of that experience now as I'm advising, coaching, and helping.
I absolutely couldn't agree any more with you, David. I think that breadth of experience and being able to engage with different cultures, and just also being able to draw upon experiences and the understanding of different places. One of the things that when I've been involved in projects around new concepts or new businesses, often it's just being able to pick up and say, well, actually, I saw that in Gdansk, as we talked about earlier, or that in Vegas, or that in, I mean, that adds a lot of value in its own right, let alone the cultural positivity it gives you, and the ability to be able to look at situations with different viewpoints.
Yeah. Julia's just asked, will my book include some coaching techniques? Well, yeah, I think I'll bring out, what the how have I built teams, and a lot of that was born out of the fact that, and those who have worked with me over the years, and there are many of them, I've never really wanted to work very hard. If I'm going to immerse myself into a workplace, I want to really have fun and be a high performing employee, leader, whatever I was. And in order to do that, I needed the best people around me possible. And I've been really, really privileged to have worked with some of those. And I expect there are some of them watching this broadcast now. I hope so. If they're out there, raise your hand. But and I always reflect. I often reflect on the time I had when I was running restaurants across England, and goodness knows there were many of them, and many happy memories of working in restaurants, or being a marketing director, or being a brand builder, or creating something amazing. And so there'll be lots in there, Ulia.
Perfect. I think we're pretty much out of time now, but it's been a really great catch up. Where we're coming up to the end of the year, so this is actually our last webinar from MAPAL and the English language anyway for the year. I think we've got one more coming up in another language. But thank you for everyone for joining. Thanks for coming and being part of the MAPAL community. Thank you, David, for your time. We really look forward to catching up next year. And if anyone's watching and wants to share something they're doing, or talk a little bit about some of their initiatives for next year, we'd really love to have you on board and talk to you. So feel free to drop me a message. I'm very active on LinkedIn. And thank you so much again, everybody. Take care. Have a great new year where it comes.
Bye, everybody.